morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Pretty crazy out there. It looks pretty though.
Yeah, it does. And it's not so sloppy and messy yet, so
Yeah,
not that bad.
it's true.
Your house looks nice.
Thank you. I have one family member, the youngest one, who decorates the entire house. It's hilarious.
Wow.
Extremely festive guy.
I'll be right back. Let me see what I get.
Hello. Hi, Pete.
All right.
There, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Lance. Okay, let's see. Well, it looks like all our committee is here, and we welcome Tom Sharp as well. So, let's see. Go ahead and call the meeting to order. And let's see. Christy, could you please cover some administrative matters here in the beginning, our near-term committee calendar, the meeting calendar, the rules about public comment, and then I'll hit the open meeting announcement.
Okay. So I have the review meeting rules to invite public comment right here. But the near-term calendars, do you mean to do the to-do list?
Just our meeting calendar that we agreed on was to do a meeting, I think, every 2 weeks.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I have that right here too. Sorry about
Yeah.
that. Okay.
We're taking a week off, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So for a period of 3 months, we plan to meet bi-weekly. We've set our next meeting after today for January 8th, and we'll plan to go forward like that until March 26th, at which point the goal will be to move to monthly or every other month meetings. And if everyone's all right with me moving on to the next item, the public comment. We invite public comment at the end of each agenda item and input with a 1-minute limit for each speaker.
I can't hear you, Christy.
Dear, okay.
Yeah,
You.
you're actually, your volume, it rises and then it falls and then it rises again. So I'm not sure what's causing that.
How about my picture? Is it coming through clear or is it fuzzy?
No, it looks, yeah, picture's fine.
Okay, that's how we can tell. Well, then maybe I'll just speak up. Does that sound okay? Can you hear me now?
I can. How do I get the picture? Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So when you look at the view where there are 9 boxes in a cube on the upper right corner of your screen,
Yeah.
you can do gallery view.
Okay.
That should show you everyone. Are you able to see everybody?
I can't hear you.
Oh dear. Okay. I might just exit and come back in. That usually will fix it.
Okay.
Okay.
So.
Everybody survived the blizzard.
Yeah.
That's good.
We didn't have a blizzard. We had a slushard or something.
Typical
No
Cape
snow.
Cod.
Yeah.
A lot better than 2 feet of snow like they had up north.
Yeah.
I don't know, I guess 2 feet of snow might have been fun. Pain in the butt, but fun.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, Christie's gone. Let me see if I can share our
Hi
agenda.
There she is.
Hi.
Hi. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sounds good.
Oh, good. Do you want me to read, do you want me to reread our intention for our meetings, or should I just start now with public comment?
Oh, we could hear the first thing that you meant, the calendar for the meetings. Yeah,
So I can share the agenda after that if you want, Pete. I'll read the next one and then I'll do the share screen on the agenda.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to ask about that. I just pulled the agenda up in case we were going to share it, but if you've got it there, outstanding.
Okay. So, okay. So for our rules to invite public comment, the committee plans to invite, or our policy is to invite public comment at the end of each agenda item with a 1-minute limit for each speaker. We welcome more feedback through email, as well as proposals to the committee that can become future agenda items.
So Christy, I just had a thought because your sound, I could hear it going out again. I wonder if your microphone is on the side. Is it possible that the microphone gets obscured or something? If you're using the mouse?
Let's see. I'm gonna switch. How does this sound? Does it go in and out?
Yeah.
Darn. I did test it. I could switch to phone audio.
Oh, it's up to you. We can try to work with it. I mean,
I work on Zoom every day and it
Wow.
works. So I can't figure out what it would be today.
Hmm.
Of course. Well, were you all able to hear our policy? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I'll share the screen now for the agenda. It'll just take me a minute. So if you wanted, Pete, you could go on to the next item while I get it going.
Sure. So there's open meeting law training that's available. There was a class that was offered this past week. It's an online class, obviously. There's also one that's going to be, I believe, January 7th. So I did some checking. I registered for the class this past week, unfortunately involved in another volunteer activity that ran over and I wasn't able to log in for that training. But after I checked with the office that held it, it's basically going over the same training that's available on the online training videos. If you're running out of things to do over the holidays here, I'd encourage you to go check those out. It's always worth a refresher because we want to keep a careful adherence to open meeting laws as we move forward. So there is another online live training session. Again, that's going to be on the 7th of January. I believe the email was sent out by Courtney earlier regarding that. Oh, by the way, before we move on, I wanted to say, and I don't know if Courtney Butler is online for the meeting, probably not, but I just wanted to, I think we all owe her a great degree of thanks for all that she's done. I know today's her last day as the executive assistant to the town administrator, but she's been the glue holding a lot of things together. And we appreciate all her efforts. So let's see.
Definitely.
So guys, I'm just a member of the public. I hope I'm not like hacking in or anything like that.
Hi, no, absolutely not.
All right, great. Sorry, I put myself in this meeting and I walked away. So
Okay, thanks for getting the agenda up, Christy. So we are at this point to item 3. So Christy, I'll let you make the motion. You have the meeting minutes, and thank you for doing that.
Yes. I make the motion to approve our minutes from our meeting minutes from Friday, December 14th meeting.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Okay, well,
And
I will
so-
send those to the town along with the 4 attachments.
Excellent, thank you.
Great.
Okay, a couple of items regarding our committee organization. And let me ask Rebecca, do you have a copy of the charge handy? I was going to pull it up in my own paperwork, but if you have it,
I do.
okay, thanks. Could you, if you would, could you just go ahead and restate the charge so that we all
Sure.
just have it in mind?
Did I try and screen share it?
Oh, sure.
It won't let me because another person's sharing. I'll just read it. It's on the website if anybody wants to find it. In accordance with the Wellfleet Town Charter, the Board of Selectmen hereby establishes the Bike and Walkways Committee as an ad hoc committee with the following charge. The Bike and Walkway Committee is hereby established to consider ways to provide safe areas for biking and walking. The Board of Selectmen believes that these activities should be available seasonally and year-round, as they are an important means of local transportation, are popular activities in the town, and promote good health. The Bike and Walkway Committee is charged with the following tasks. 1, to work with the Cape Cod National Seashore, the towns of Provincetown and Truro, and the Cape Cod Commission to establish the continuation of the bike trail northward into Provincetown. 2, to prepare a plan for future biking and walking routes throughout the town of Wellfleet. The Wellfleet Bike and Walkway Committee shall be composed of 5 members. All members will be appointed by the Board of Selectmen. To establish an overlapping appointment period, the following appointments will be made initially: 2 for 3 years, 2 for 2 years, 1 for 1 year. After the expiration of the initial terms, all terms will be for 3 years.
Okay, thank you. The one action we took at our last meeting was to consider near-term objectives, meaning 6-month objectives. And committee members were invited to think about those and to provide any inputs. And then we go over those at this meeting. And this is not necessarily to establish these objectives at this meeting, but rather to talk about them and continue to gather inputs, and then ultimately to decide what our true objectives are. So some ideas that have come in and have been collecting those in the last 2 weeks here. First of all, maintain complete training. These are, again, objectives for the committee as we move forward in our work. Number 1, maintain complete transparency in efforts and communication. Second idea, in a statement of objectives, engage town engage town offices and external agencies in executing our charge as a committee. So in other words, to be performing outreach outside the committee. To actively support the select board regarding bikeway issues. And the last idea here was to plan, continue planning a post-COVID bike event for the community, which is something that is an agenda item here to be discussed later. So some of those, those are the inputs so far. I mean, there of course is the discussion of whether some of those items are goals versus objectives. So we can frame them in, appropriately. But as we're looking at what objectives the committee would have, are there any other ideas that anybody wants to discuss right now, or we'll just continue to reflect on this question and think about what our 6-month objectives should be?
Well, I think they look great. I feel like they're some of them are less concrete steps than maybe we could dream of, but they're also great goals. And I guess objectives, yeah.
No, I think you raised a great point, and that is that they, rather than stating that, some of them sound a bit like objectives, and what we'd want to do is really add some meat to the bone as we turn them in, convert them into objectives that are measurable and actionable. So yeah, good point. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, we'll go ahead and move ahead, but at this point, it's food for thought in our meeting. And as we express our objectives going up for the next 6 months, it informs people what we're working on and provides a point of entry to give us input. Okay, item 5 on the agenda, post-COVID bicycle safety events. Christy, do you want to talk to that one?
Yes. So I've got our notes together from our last event, which we really enjoyed, which was a collaboration with the rec department and the Wellfleet Police Department to provide an opportunity for kids to safely enjoy biking and learn how to bike and learn bike safety, and also to encourage wearing helmets. So, and part of that was connecting the police to kids, because they have a goal also of providing helmets. And so the police brought helmets to make sure that every kid had a helmet. And we brought 6, and that was plenty. But they also promised to provide vouchers for any child who did not have a helmet beyond the 6. So I reached out to Becky and to Mike Hurley of the chief of police, and they're really excited. I said, this is one of our goals, and are you guys game for me to contact you when we're closer to an appropriate time? And they're both very game. So we're excited to carry on with that. Our intention was to do it every year, and last spring felt just a little unknown, so we didn't do it. One thing Becky pointed out is that she has successfully done lots of activities and events outside in the past year, and that given we can look again. So what I'd like to propose is that we revisit this in March or April, because Becky said, she has experience working with Hillary Green, I think the health agent in town, and we could have a safe masked outdoor event this spring regardless. So I thought that was interesting, and something that I'd be open to. So
okay, so in that sense, perhaps we should take post-COVID off of this event. I mean, if there's interest in or an ability to set it up before we're all back to normal.
Yeah, I think so. What I'd like to do is maybe look at it again, so I could put it on my calendar and say we'll put it on our agenda in mid-March and just see how things are. And I said to Becky, maybe what we do is only advertise it in the Wellfleet Elementary School backpack mail and just consider it a very local event for this particular year. So but to make
Okay.
sure every kid has their helmet and has their safety rules down. So.
Okay, if March will work, I mean, that will be, March sounds so far away, but really it's only 2 months, right? I mean, January,
Right.
February, now we're into March. So are there any
And
long lead planning items that we need to consider now before
no,
getting?
it was a really straightforward event, especially because we had the support of the police and the rec department. And actually, Mary Beth Rodman gave us the school parking lot for no
Right.
cost. And so really it's an incredibly smooth event with everyone involved and supporting it. Made it really simple. Last time we had it, we did it in June. So if we discuss it in March, just as far as at that
Yeah.
point deciding, do we want to not erase the post-COVID, that's, I think we can see, and we could consider doing a May event or June. So.
Okay. Does someone want to make a motion then that we will go ahead and revisit the bike safety event as an agenda item in March?
Sure. I make a motion for that.
Okay. I'll second.
Second.
Great. Lance seconds. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye. Okay. Good. On to the next item, the bikeway route. So there were a few items to discuss. First is methodology for analyzing route alternatives. And I'm going to turn that over to Lance to give a brief overview of what direction we're going with that. So Lance.
It's a big task, and we're a small committee, but actually that's in our favor, because what it forces us to do is to say, well, where can we look to see what's been done before, what's out there, what's reasonable, and use that as our guidance. And fortunately, there's an enormous, not only amount of data about evaluating, having methodologies to evaluate alternative bike paths, but there's a lot of agreement. So our position is really to synthesize the best for the town of Wellfleet that's consistent with all of the players, CCC, DCR, MassDOT, National Seashore, and there's two parts to this approach. One part is the methodology. The other part is, well, what are the alternatives? And let's think about that as a left hand, right hand. And one thing we can do is to not let the left hand know what the right hand is doing. So we can keep the methodology separate from the subgroup of our committee that's doing the getting the path alternatives. So as a guy that's working on the methodology, I know that the paths have to come somewhere between Route 6 and the National Seashore, including Route 6, but not including the National Seashore. So it's somewhere in that area. Fortunately, Wellfleet is broad relative to Truro and Provincetown there. So there are some possible choices, but I don't know what these are. I know that they've been proposed, but from the methodology point of view, I'm encouraged by the following thing. There's such agreement. We reviewed not only MassDOT, CCC, and DCR, but we've looked at other towns in Massachusetts that have selected bike trails. We've looked at other cities in the United States. We've looked at the EU plans, UK plans around the world, and they're very common. So we have a lot to pick on. The first thing is the methodology that you have to do is you have to say, what are your goals? And there we will have to do a lot of thinking and selecting, and then we'll need approval from the town that yes, these 3, 4 goals are the right goals to think about. They're consistent, they meet all of these criteria. Once you get the goals, you have to do another thing, and you also need buy-in and agreement, which is to say, well, what are the relative importance of the goals? How important is, here are some goals, for example, that the separated paths of MassDOT in their 2017 or the master plan in 2019 say safety, comfort, and convenience. Suppose those were the goals, what are the relative importance of them? How important is safety relative to comfort? We have to come up with some kind of weights. Once we do this, we have the goals and we have the assignment of the relative importance to them. It's then a matter of decomposing the goals into objectives. And the objectives are very specific ways of, so for example, everybody agrees the world over that safety for bike paths is a primary goal. So how do we measure safety in terms of the alternatives that are available to Wellfleet? And in the context of the bike path, those would be the objectives. And so the objective may be to avoid paths that are too arduous because they cause accidents. That's an example. That would be an objective, and then we have to take the objective and break it down into evaluation criteria. How do we measure too arduous? Well, there are some standards. A 5% slope is considered too arduous. A slippery path that has a very, like gravel or something that you can't get traction in, takes too much effort. So those might be the criteria. And our job on the committee, those people who are working on the methodology, is to come up for each objective of each goal, specify enough criteria so we get a really good handle on that aspect. And then we have to say, okay, we're going to weight these according to the weight of the goal. And then we're going to combine them together and we're going to come up with a score. And also that'll be a score for all of the paths that, in fact, the methodology committee hasn't seen and won't see until it's time for us to do the job. And we'll apply these equally to all of the path alternatives. And in addition, we'll get a score. And in addition, we'll make observations about 2 other things, the pluses and the minuses about these scores, things that stand out on a particular proposed trail that, my gosh, this would be fabulous if we could do it from the point of view of enjoyment of a large segment of our population, or it particularly favors children or people with disabilities. Those would be pluses. Minuses might be, it's very noisy, very smelly, not very comfortable in that way. Those are examples where we might note the pluses and minuses. And then we simply come forward with a recommendation. But before we do that, if it looks like there's a close tie between paths, or it looks like maybe one surprising path is favored over the others, we might say, okay, is that because we weighted wrong? So we'll do a sensitivity analysis. We'll change the weights. And we'll say, instead of weighting safety as 40%, let's make it 60% and see what happens to the ordering of the thing. If that doesn't make any difference, then we were on a good track. We'll do all of this after we have approval from the town and other people in terms of the goals and the weighting. We'll do the ranking, and then we'll present this and say, here's our recommendation. And the recommendation may say, this one is really favored. It's heads and shoulders above the others, but it has some problems. But here are our ideas for mitigation. We can address those things. They're not insurmountable. MassDOT and others have told us how to do it, and it's reasonable to apply that, and would cost such and such, and we do it. So I feel really good about the committee's ability to do this job, come up with a methodology that people will buy into and agree is fair and equitable and reasonable and best engineering practice, and then to apply it. So.
Thanks, Lance. I think that's a great summary of what we're trying to do. Any comments?
Well put together, Lance.
Thanks.
Really detailed and I like it.
I think, yeah, and Lance, key points there. I mean, the fact is, we're looking at creating a firewall between the consideration of what the alternatives are, identifying the alternatives, and on the one hand, but on the other, putting together a systematic, objective methodology for comparing alternatives that's based on best practices in the state and the country and even overseas. You know, obviously we want to have a traceability to what's going on, to guidelines followed here in Massachusetts, but I think it's great to have that peripheral knowledge of what's been applied successfully overseas as well. Since we have an opportunity here to really to leverage best practices, and thank you. So we'll be, Lance is heading this up, but drafting a methodology, and once it's drafted, considering all these inputs that are being considered, and seeking external input on this draft as well, again, in the interest of transparency, but also to try to capture the knowledge and expertise that people outside the committee have, including state agencies and the Cape Cod Commission. Then we'll go forward to the, and other town departments, by the way. Then we'll go to the select board for their agreement that this is the right thing to do, and then so that we could implement this methodology. Okay, thanks, Lance. Yes.
I want to add just one thing, if I could, is that there is an enormous amount of agreement about three things that are really important. The importance of safety, the importance of four things: generating alternatives, not just picking one, but generating plausible alternatives for the paths, and this includes all kinds of paths, evaluating them, and getting public input. Those are key to MassDOT, CCC, DCR, and everybody, EU standards, hugely so, UK standard. So that's what we're going to do, and we're firmly in that principle and abide by it.
Okay, thanks. And Lance, as our point person for doing this, you would be the point of contact really to receive inputs. I mean, again, outside inputs can come in through our email, but Lance is our person who's synthesizing those inputs into developing this methodology. Great. If there's nothing else, I'll move to the next item here, and that's criteria for evaluating route alternatives. That is, of course, part of developing the methodology, is considering the considering criteria. Why is it separated here in the agenda? Because we were considering multiple sources, as Lance mentioned. One in particular warranted special attention, and that is to make sure that we get proper input locally. And there are a lot of people with a lot of local knowledge about factors that are unique to our location here in Wellfleet. And it was with that in mind that we had this as a separate item. And I believe it was Rebecca. Let me turn to you, Rebecca, and also Ned, for any inputs in that on that topic. I think you were thinking about that since the last meeting.
Yeah, so some of the criteria are actually part of our charge. So criteria, for example, that it be for transportation and recreation,
Mm-hmm.
and that that it's a trail that connects to something else. And then I would add safety, as you mentioned, that's obviously a huge one, and that it can be suitable for all ages. There's a rating system in the bike trail creation world that has slipped my mind with that rating system, but it would need to be for all ages because you're obviously a community that serves all ages. So those are a few. There's obviously a lot more. Ned, do you have any? There's list from other sources.
Yeah, I mean, I have, other than the obvious, again, the safety is the huge part of the criteria. Strong separation between bicycles and vehicles, good sight lines, well-marked bike lanes, avoiding dangerous intersections, all part of the safety. And then the functional aspect of it too, as transportation, commuter transportation for a lot of people. So to have access into town and to the beaches, I think really important parts of that. And then, of course, the criteria also gets into, at some point, private property impacts and environmental impacts. And a big part for me is I would really like to put a focus on creating a really pleasant recreational experience too. I think if we can get the path that hopefully we're going to talk about a little bit later, but as we're going through the seashore, it's just some really gorgeous, if we could get the route I would like, or one of the possible routes that I would like, I would really like to. I've been on bike trails, one in particular up in Prince Edward Island that really impressed me. It goes from one end of the island to the other, 70 odd miles. And every couple miles at the most, they'd have a nice little rest stop with a picnic table, nice vistas typically. And I think we could incorporate that. I would like to see, like, the rest of the Cape Cod Bike Trail, it doesn't have that anywhere. And I just think it's a wasted opportunity. You get family experience, kids coming along, you could stop and, just enjoy the vista besides just the actual bicycling, just to get a real feel for how beautiful the Outer Cape is. And another thing, they do have some of these on the rest of the bike trail. I would really love to see interpretive stations along the way, especially like the route I really prefer is a lot of it is Old Kings Highway, bring in some of the history. There's an old school site from the 1700s close by, just to get this whole experience in nature interpretive stations. I've also been in other bike trails and other places, but just loads of that. And it's just so cool. It gets you maybe off the bike too. And the seashore could be right there, hopefully. A chance to explore that and really get to know the experience. I know that gets a little touchy because sometimes people they want to keep the pristine seashore. They don't want hordes of people tramping around, but I don't think we'd ever get to that. But in any case, I just like the idea of having those aspects added to the trail, not just a piece of stretch of pavement going through really try to emphasize the natural beauty of the Outer Cape, which
Thanks.
Other than that, another big part of the criteria and the problem with going through the seashore is you do run into gradient. My brother Derek and I rode the route that we would like to really propose last weekend, and there are some gradient issues, but I think there are ways of engineering and getting around it. I don't think we should. Too often it's rejected outright. Oh, you can't because it's more than 5%. First of all, I believe you can get a waiver from the 5%. I'm going to go this coming weekend and put my Garmin on my bike so I can get readings of the different gradients to see how far off we would be in some of these different areas in the seashore. But anyway, I may be getting ahead of myself here. So those are some ideas I've had so far on the criteria.
Ned, thanks. I was writing furiously while Ned was talking, and also Rebecca. What I heard you, the points I heard you mention, private property impacts, promoting cycling for transportation, creating a good recreational cycling experience, safety. Everybody put safety at the top of the list. It's in the middle of my list because I was writing notes. Connectivity to other, to the town's various features. It should be something that is accessible to all ages and skill levels. And by all ages, I mean, we mean, yeah, obviously, reasonably speaking, people who can maneuver a vehicle. Good a point you made, Ned, good separation with from between cycle and motor traffic, I believe. Is that what you meant by safe separation?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Let's see, avoiding dangerous intersections, accessibility, including grade. But for people who have different abilities, creating a path that they can access as well. You mentioned in particular access to town.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, yeah, that's why the accessibility, that's what I was thinking more of, the access routes into safe access routes into town, and whatever we could do to get out to the beaches fairly safely too, I think would be
Yeah,
nice.
that's, and I had this, in fact, that was the point I had here, access to the town into the beaches. And then you mentioned, well, I wrote down a note here, facilities and stations, really meaning presentations of, noting historic or significant things that the trail might go past, or providing a rest stop area for cyclists, or even just a bench, that sort of thing.
Right.
Great ideas. It remains open for others. And Lance, it looked like you were about to say something.
I just wanted to add to the thing is that there's two others that have to be in there that aren't really, Ned, your focus. One is cost. We have to consider the cost, but there are ways to consider it. And Pete's got some really good ideas about how to approach that, estimate that, so it's consistent with the notion of the goals in Massachusetts of increasing ridership. And the other thing is the permitting that you need, how long it takes, or whether you have to do land acquisition as part of it, eminent domain. That's always a question in every path in the world. There's the cost and getting either access or permitting to do it.
And that sort of thing is, I mean, we mentioned private property impacts as an objective. I think that's an important one. I mean, ideally, we're talking about a trail that has no private property impacts. Is that everybody's understanding of the ideal?
It is, but I would hate to start excluding possible excellent routes because we have some private property issues, which, you know, could be potentially worked out, I think. And I know cost is a big thing too, but I also hate to, you know, shy away from a more ambitious route that, because the costs are going to be up there, but, you know,
Well,
I
Ned,
mean, I know we have to consider it, you know, I'm not saying that you can't, but.
well, I like one thing you just said there in particular. You said if they can be worked out.
Yeah.
If we have a situation that can be worked out to everyone's advantage or everyone's, to meet everyone's interests, I mean, obviously, and sometimes it's just a case of rolling up sleeves and working it out to work out an issue like that to everyone's satisfaction, hopefully. But yeah, okay. These are great inputs. Now, obviously, they're not, they don't fit dictionary definition of classification of, you know, objectives versus goals versus criteria. But these kinds of inputs are the things that can be shaped into goals, objectives, criteria for the methodology that that Lance is spearheading. And, you know, again, looking at best practices, looking at other methodologies that have been developed is all good. Local input into these goals, objectives, and criteria is also critical. So we want to keep collecting these ideas and make sure that all interests are considered here. Any other discussion regarding criteria? It's a work in progress. Yes, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Yeah, I'm new to the committee, and thank you for putting this together and allowing me an opportunity to attend. My good friend, I know Barbara Taylor, was involved quite a bit with the Bike and Walkway Committee, and God rest her soul. And I worked through her, and I just thought it was only appropriate for me to maybe try to represent her, although she had knowledge that I'll never have on regarding the bike path. But just regarding the whole private property issue in terms of the criteria, when you look at it, if there's ways you can work around it, having been in contact with a lot of the private property owners, specifically under the power lines, right? That, you know, that's something that obviously, and Ned, you said, you know, there's something you could work out or what have you, but I know that that's a very strong opinion that a lot of people have, that I think, and Rebecca, you were on the committee, and I think Christy, you were on the committee to receive some of those letters from some of those people. So anyway, just my 2 cents on that. You know, you asked for input, Peter, and
Yes.
I think I'm under a minute, so thank you.
Tom, thank you very much. The way we view it, we're all neighbors, and so we're all trying to make this work right.
Thank you.
So.
And you know, can I just add one thing to that? I mean, especially as you were talking about, Tom, the power lines, which is where I think there's a good opportunity there. I think our best possibility there is where we run into private property issues. We're right on the edge of the seashore, and that's where Colstrom seemed to be amenable to potentially letting us skirt into the seashore to skirt around those areas.
Yeah,
because
right.
Yeah,
and I'm with you on that. And I was looking at so Barbara, you know, she put out a lot of information at the point, Ned. And in 2012, they talked about this eastern alignment. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically it crosses Old Kings Highway or Old County, and goes up, I think maybe behind the aging, and then goes up to that would be the east inside the seashore, up, you know, on the other side of Delaware Pond. And I think they called that the Cadillac, right? I think that was the Cadillac version they called it. So
yeah.
But yeah, I'm with you on that. Yep. Thank you for that input. And
Okay.
maybe offline or something, I don't have an update on how the successor went with Colstrom. And I know you guys, I think the Bike and Walkway Committee met with them, with some town selectmen. So we could talk about that offline, but I was looking to get updates, and I just saw the article in the paper, and that's all I saw. So we can talk about that later. I don't want to take.
happy, and Tom, happy to have a conversation with you anytime.
Okay,
Just,
thanks.
yeah. The route accessibility requirements is the next item on the agenda. This is something that Rebecca and I, between us, have been looking at, and this is, it's okay to work together on this because we're basically just essentially collecting information at this point. It's regarding Americans with Disabilities Act requirements and how they've been implemented in other similar situations for bike routes and also walkways. And we have a lot to learn to incorporate those correctly. One particular question we had in looking at this, which in my views remains to be answered, and that is, are the requirements based on who is actually building or funding a particular trail? For instance, does something that the National Park Service is doing follow the same rules as something that the U.S. Department of Transportation is sponsoring? So we're still digging that out. We want to make sure that we're looking at the requirements correctly. So there's still some work to be done. I will report that in the interim, it does look kind of promising. We've been able to find some information about how ADA requirements have been applied to bikeways, and including off-road bikeways. And there's some interesting engineering solutions to make trails ADA compliant, even though you might stand there on a trail that hasn't been completed and look at a hill and say, there's no way you can get a trail up that hill. Turns out there are ways to make it ADA compliant. So very encouraging as Ned, as you're looking at various route alternatives, and you alluded to this, that there are ways to make trails accessible. So we're going to continue collecting information that we can report back in these meetings as far as how we can make trails ADA compliant.
Yeah, there absolutely is. You know, that's what my brother and I were looking at that a lot this past weekend. You know, between creating switchback kind of situation to gradually get you up the inclines, and it isn't always so much up as down is sometimes a real issue, where you don't want to have too steep and down, you know, where kids are really going to go ripping down there, and that's where you get accidents. But that, and you know, at the power lines, potential, it's a big heap of sand. You could potentially knock the top off the hill and spread that out to ease off the gradients. Anyway, as you say, there are ways around it. It isn't insurmountable.
And fortunately, it's sand, not granite.
Yeah,
So
exactly. No, that's
yeah.
huge. You know, it makes it far easier to engineer, I would think. So.
Well, it turns out that the engineering specifications for the slopes have two components, at least two components. One is what's the angle of the incline, but the other is what's the length over which the incline takes place. Right. So you can, ideally, you have less than a 5% grade. However, you could have a steeper grade if it's for a short length, and that length, the approved length varies according to what the incline is. As you can imagine, if you had a 10% grade, that would be pretty extreme. You could only have that for a very short distance. However, ADA compliance doesn't mean you have zero steep grades. It just means you have to deal with those steep grades. And yeah, it's encouraging to see that there are solutions that have been used around the country, and that's what we've been finding is based on applications that we've seen around the country. So it's good.
Or sometimes they don't use any of that. You go. I think arguably one of the most beautiful bike trails in the world is the Provincetown bike trail, and there are grades up there. I've checked them out at 15%, and that is steep. You know, even for someone as experienced as I am, 15% grade is pretty tough. They have them, and they don't have. You know, they have had very few issues up there with, but you know, obviously we're not looking at that, and that's why I want to try to go out on some of these proposed trails we have and see how far off are we. I don't think just from my own experience of looking at when we did it last weekend, I'd say there's very little over 6-7%. That's still quite a bit, that's going, but potentially you could maybe get a waiver at 6 or 7%, but
And
anyway.
Okay, well, more to follow on this. We'll
Right.
I'll continue collecting information on this, and Rebecca, and we'll bring it back here to the meeting, so we'll all be aware. The next is on the item on the agenda, identification of route alternatives. And let me emphasize that it's on the agenda on next, right after the methodology discussion. But as we've talked about here, we're putting a firewall between the two efforts, one developing an objective methodology, and then on the other hand, collecting data regarding the alternatives, the route alternatives. Yeah. So Ned, I don't know if you have any overview comments, but I know that's a work in progress.
Yeah, it definitely is a work in progress.
Let me just
actually,
interrupt.
go ahead, Jim.
I'm going to turn off the video and stick my fingers in my ears because I don't want to know what Ned's great routes are. So please.
Oh, well, with that in mind, yeah, let's see if we can keep everybody in the meeting. But Ned, if you could describe maybe the efforts you're undertaking, but not talk about particular routes.
Yeah. I mean, I would say in general, I was just looking at through the years that I've been on the committees, some of the basic routes which have been previously proposed, which are basically getting out to Cahoon Hollow Road and then going up, and that's not very good or very popular. Ditto with Long Pond Road. Getting back to Barbara Taylor, I can't find it. I thought I had it somewhere, but she had come up with a really excellent history of it all, going back with the National Seashore back in the 60s. They had some, I remember reading what she had, they had some incredible routes going through the seashore. That I think at this point is pie in the sky. It's just like so far away that it's not even worth pursuing, even though it would be fabulous. So the main route I've come up with, and I know, Rebecca, did you get that? Derek sent out the route that we've, the proposal that we're working on.
I did. I haven't had a chance to look closely, but I just saw that there were a few maps this morning. So
right. Again, as you say, Peter, that's a work in progress, but it's basically Old Kings Highway. We kind of,
well, although Ned, yeah, I would just caution, I think for all of us, because we're going to have to be applying this methodology, if we could not talk about specific routes. I mean, I just wanted to bring it up on the agenda here that you are, in fact, the one who's collecting information regarding the routes, right?
Right.
And,
so yeah, this seems like a slippery slope on how we're going to figure out how to work forward with this.
Well, if you could be our point man for collecting the information on the routes, I mean, which it sounds like you're doing.
Yeah.
Once we have that information compiled, then we could look at them. We can look at these route alternatives, side by side.
And I have to admit, I am right now really singly focused on what I think is the gold standard route, which again, I guess I can't get into the details of it, but I think it's just such an incredible route so like for me, I get it. We got to take in all the options, and even on we already have a couple different options off this main route. But yeah, I will continue to gather data. I'm glad, because I also felt the same way today. I got here today. I was like, oh man, I haven't had a chance to get this all put together. But one route, anyway, my brother did put together a pretty nice proposal of it, and he sent it to Rebecca, and I have it too. I don't know, I guess I'll have it on paper, and I don't know how we want to, proceed beyond that. But I will continue to try to outline some of the other routes too. Yeah,
it's at this early stage in particular, I think we want to make sure we don't exclude any options, because sometimes it's a hybrid option comes up that no one had on their radar, and it turns out to be worth considering. So a lot of different routes have been proposed over many years, and I think we want to do a side-by-side comparison to make sure that we're not leaving anything out. Christie?
Right.
I just wanted to ask, while we're all here together, what kind of format is the ideal way to get a route so that we can assess it? So especially if there are people who are not within the committee who want to propose routes, how should people do that? In what way?
To propose routes to be considered.
What kinds of information do you want? A map and mileage, grade? What are we looking at here?
Well, I think that in particular, we want Ned to be aware of any routes that are proposed, because
Okay.
we want to consider the routes in terms of, I would say, thought about it a little bit, but Ned, you and I haven't talked about it. In my view, collecting the route information would be identifying each route by a name to distinguish it from the others, even though some of them may be very similar. But identify the route, give a brief description of the route. By brief, a paragraph at the most, and include and then include the distance. Oh, and in that paragraph, it would include any issues we would want to identify, as challenges that would need to be addressed, whether they're grade issues, anything else that just intuitively rises to the surface as an issue, and the distance, the length of the route. Ned, some of the work that your brother had done demonstrated to me, you can't always tell how long a route's going to be, and some of the routes are much shorter than others.
Yeah. We've done that, and that's like I said, I want to get gradients now, but we have already gotten distances, and we've got pretty detailed on this one, our gold standard, but I'll try to get more details on other options too. So
great. I think that having a number of alternatives that we can assess side by side is going to be key, and we want to consider all the a good sized population of those candidates. Many have been proposed over the years. Some of them have fallen off the table for various reasons and maybe need to be revisited to make sure that they're not viable. Yeah, Christy, what do you think?
That's great. And then I was wondering too, do the routes all need to have the same starting and ending point? Are we looking for all of them to end at Collins Road and begin at the bike path parking lot by PB?
The state is planning on going. The state already is going to go as far as the campground.
Yes.
And their program would take what they're budgeted, et cetera, would take the trail as I should word this carefully. Our select board has said that the town would like to see it go as far as Old County Road. Mm-hmm. The state is taking the route right now as far as the campground. Logically, they could continue as far as Old County Road. Since our select board has already said we'd like to see DCR continue to Old County Road, yeah. Let's talk about it. I think our starting point could be logically considered to be Old County Road. Yeah,
because they're going to absolutely get to at least Old County Road. They're not going to, the only reason they're stopping at the campground now is to have a pause to not go straight on through to the highway because they know the town objects to it. So eventually, at some point, they're going to at least get to Old County Road. So the point being, more or less, our jumping off point is around Old County Road for, I think, the potential routes. And then, as you said, Chrissy, I would say getting out to Collins Road is a really great, potentially you could go beyond Collins Road, but if you could get to Collins Road, that's really nice because that takes you all the way down to South Pamet on nice roads. And at that point, it's I would love to see something better at Ventura, but that's not our part of our agenda anyway. But
although we need to be careful not to, I personally think we need to be careful about picking an endpoint in Truro, picking a particular endpoint. I think we, because not all the alternatives will end at the same place. Some alternatives can continue along Route 6, as we know.
Yeah, yeah. No, and it
Um,
could very well, you know, again, money issues and whatnot, it could, you know, to me, even if we only got to Gull Pond Road, from that point on, Route 6 is pretty safe. You know, you got nice, big, wide lanes, and it's not as scenic as what we would otherwise have, but yeah, you know.
I would think we could say that the end point, the northerly end point, could just be, if we describe it as the Truro line in a place that's agreed upon with
Right.
in a place that would connect with a Truro bikeway. I mean,
Right.
as we know, they've got Sharrows painted on Collins Road, and we know that Route 6 is already has bike lanes painted along that and along that length in Truro as well.
Yeah.
So that would leave it open where we could be connecting with the Truro bikeway at a variety of points.
Right.
But the intention would be to connect with the Truro bikeway.
But to get back to Christie, I think Collins Road is a great goal, but yeah, as you say, Peter, it doesn't have to be that endpoint, you know, so.
So if we said it will start from where the select board has indicated it would like the DCR trail to go as far as, which is Old County Road, starting there and continuing to some point on the Truro town line where it connects with a Truro bikeway, a bikeway in Truro. So it doesn't end at somebody's front yard.
Yeah.
Or in a sand dune. Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
Awesome.
Thanks for raising that point, Christy, because it's great that we all have common definitions for what we're considering. Hey, Lance, are you there?
Yeah.
Take your fingers out of your ears. It's okay.
Okay.
So moving along in the agenda then, external engagements, and we'll keep this brief so we can wrap up. We wanted to keep this meeting close to an hour. I talked to Mark Vincent, the head of DPW, let him know that we're actively we're seeking to actively support the town in its goals regarding a bikeway, and that we're moving out. I talked with him, let him know that we were going to be reaching out to others. He was receptive, in my view, and he also encouraged that our committee would stay in touch with DPW engineering as we're putting standards and evaluation criteria together, that it would be important to connect with them as well. I think that was a great recommendation. So that is definitely one town department that we want to stay connected with. The next item on the agenda, I wanted to mention this transportation committee meeting. It occurred last week. I sat in as an observer on the meeting. Wellfleet did have official representation in the meeting from Jay Norton, who is the deputy at DPW. That meeting is under the Cape Cod Commission. It's an advisory group, has representation from around the region, various town governments. Again, I was an observer. I wanted to hear what they had to say because they were reviewing various transportation programs that are funded in the area. And I was able to hear what was discussed regarding the Wellfleet plan. And I thought I'd share that with you. And so regarding the Wellfleet Route 6 Main Street intersection, I'll just run through briefly the notes that I took during the meeting, because the topic was obviously not very long. It was 5 to 10 minutes looking at the Wellfleet project. It was a status update on the project. It was stated up front that the project is being led by the town that it's seeking regional funds. It was referred to as, quote, a traffic signal improvement project, unquote. The Route 6 reconstruction project was described as potentially including a shared use path as part of, quote, multimodal accommodations, unquote. The 75% design is due in September 2021, and the project is currently on schedule for fiscal year 2023. Mention was made in passing that public interest in the project has been expressed. Stantec reported that DOT is in the process of making inputs on the Stantec 25% design. So the two, Stantec and DOT, are coordinating. There was mention made of the addition of what they called buffered bike lanes, that is being assessed for its potential impacts on the adjoining salt marsh and cemetery along Route 6. Again, Jay Norton, deputy at DPW, was Wellfleet's representative in the meeting. He reported to the meeting that our town administrator, Maria Broadbent, is seeking a meeting with DCR and DOT. So I wanted to just mention that meeting. Again, I listened in. It was a Zoom meeting, and I listened in as an observer. We are attempting to, we are providing support for any future town engagements with external agencies. It's an item on our agenda here. I wanted to mention in particular, we're staying in touch with the select board and with the town administrator. They have set themselves objectives to hold meetings with the National Seashore and with the state agencies, and we're seeking an active role in helping to accomplish that. Other bikeway and walkway issues in Wellfleet. Rebecca, sidewalk markings.
Yeah, so we had reached out last year as a committee. We voted to request some line painting by the Wellfleet Market and by Curiouser and Curiouser. And I reached out and they confirmed that they will be painting those lines this spring. So that should help delineate where the sidewalk begins and ends next to the road in those two locations.
Great, thank you. Other projects of potential interest, there were news articles that came out about two projects, and one in Harwich and one in Barnstable, which one can appear to be examples of successful cooperation between towns and state agencies to solve problems or to provide solutions for both in walkways and in bikeways. In Harwich, there's a major sidewalk issue that's been being worked on by the state with the town. I contacted the town administrator there, who put me in touch with the town engineer, Griffin Ryder, and this was back on the 7th of December. I reached out to him. We emailed back and forth a bit. I'm waiting to get word from him now, because I want to, what I did is offer to come down, get 15 minutes of their time outside and take a look at the location of the project, so that we can have that as a data point for our own consideration of projects in Wellfleet. But if they were able to work a successful solution with the town, we certainly want to be aware. Barnstable, a similar situation where they have a project they're working with DOT, extending the rail trail. And so I contacted their town administrator, who put me in touch with the director of public works. And so we're talking now. Again, the objective is to understand what's going on with their projects, and if possible, to go do a quick site survey so that we're familiar with what they're dealing with. If any other projects come up out here on the Cape, my intention is to reach out to the town governments to see what information we can get on those projects and what lessons learned we can gain. Okay, any other issues to be brought up? Looks like a unanimous no. Okay. If with no other topics, let me ask any other inputs from outside the committee.
No, not
Okay.
for me.
Nope, we're good.
Okay. Well, thanks for attending.
Thank you, Matt.
If there are no other comments, I move to adjourn the meeting. Any second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Good
Thank you,
meeting.
Peter. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Peter.